Hey, so as usual, I'm just going to go through a bit of housekeeping, go through our task list for this week, and then we'll get started. So, first things first, any new assignment one submissions that were submitted last week or over the weekend, I've gone through those and updated your grade. If it was a resubmission, or I've given you a grade if it was your first submission. So all the grades should be up to date as of today. If there's anything wrong with the grades, if you think I misgraded your assignment, or if you didn't get an update or anything like that, just shoot me an email, let me know, and I'll go in and kind of rectify that. Uh, so assignment one should be up to date. Assignment two will be going out this week. We'll talk about it a bit later when we kind of go through the task list. And towards the end of the class, we'll kind of introduce assignment two. So as a heads up, since assignment two comes out this week, technically speaking, assignment one would technically be due this week, but again, the due date isn't hard set. So if you're not finished assignment one by this week, you're kind of behind the curve now, just if you're trying to keep pace with the assignments. Just as a heads up for kind of pacing yourself for the assignments for this course, if you aren't done assignment one, it would be a good idea to get it done sometime this week, just so you're kind of on track again. Other than that, I think that's a bit about it about assignment one. Any questions right away about assignment one at all? All good? Okay. So I'm going to get into our task list for this week. And let me just flip over to Brightspace here. So the week 4 folder should be available for you guys now. Let me just open it up here. We're now in week 4, so the week 4 folder is now open and available to you guys. In it is just more chapters of the textbook. Assignment 2 is posted in there, and then our weekly task list, of course. Okay, just to keep you updated with what's available now. So starting with the task list itself, in our week 4 task list, same kind of materials here. We're just going through the textbook, kind of following along again. Nothing new there. Extra practice 1, if you haven't already done it, might be a good idea to go through extra practice 1. Again, it's just kind of, it's not for grades or anything like that, but if you do feel like you need some extra practice with some of the tools we've covered so far, it's a good idea to get through it. Other than that, for this week, we have 2 kind of main tasks. We're going through chapter 5 this week. We kind of started it a little bit last Thursday. We talked a bit about object selection. We're going to get into a bit more detail. We're going to talk more about editing commands this week. We have a few practice problems to cover. And then, like all the other chapters, there's a section at the end of the chapter for review questions, if you choose to do them, just to make sure you're brushed up on everything we cover in this chapter. Aside from that, we'll be covering chapter 5. For task 2, assignment 2, like I mentioned, goes out this week, and it is in the Brightspace week 4 folder, if you want to take a peek at it early. We'll talk about that more kind of towards the second half of the class. We're going to take the first half of the class kind of doing chapter 5, see where we land, and then the rest of the time is kind of an assignment 2 kind of deal. Any questions about what to expect for this week? All good? Okay. So going back here with our AutoCAD chapter. So last week we talked about object selection in chapter 5.1. So we talked about the lasso tool, different ways we can select objects. This is going to become very crucial when we talk about using our editing commands, because whenever we use a editing command in AutoCAD, we have to specify which objects that we've drawn that we want to edit. Uh, Otherwise, if I try to use something like copy, if you kind of recall from using something like Word, if you copy paste, you have to select a block of words before you can copy and then therefore paste. Same thing with AutoCAD. You have to be able to select objects and then copy those objects in order to paste them. So object selection, it's pretty straightforward, but it is a very crucial tool going forwards. So our first editing command beyond object selection, 5.2, we're going to talk about moving objects. So our first basic editing command is the move command. It's located in our Home tab Modify panel. You'll note that all of our editing commands that we'll be covering are in our Modify panel. So in the previous couple weeks, we've been talking about drawing, our basic drawing commands. Those were all in the Draw panel. Now we're moving on to Modify for all of our editing tools. So starting with Move, Move is just in the top left-hand corner of the Modify panel. And this will allow us to, well, move objects around our drawing space. If we need to relocate things, if we've drawn separate pieces of an object or an overall kind of piece of equipment or an overall diagram, and then we need to start piecing those objects together, this is a really handy tool for that. So I'm going to draw just a few objects here. I'll just draw a circle and a line just for simplicity. So our move command, I'm just going to click it for now. We'll talk about other ways we can use move, but I'm just going to click move. And you'll notice that my crosshair changed from a plus sign to a little box. So outside of the move command, I have the standard crosshair. When I go to select move, it's now a little box. And I get the prompt there from my dynamic input that says to select objects. So AutoCAD's prompting me that in two different ways, I am now supposed to be selecting objects. Whenever our cursor turns into that square, that's also the selection tool. So I know I'm in a scenario where I now have to go select objects. So we talked about object selection. I can kind of select this circle on the left-hand side in a few different ways. I can just left click on it. I can use my lasso tool to lasso around it. I can just left click on it and it'll highlight in blue. Whenever my objects are highlighted in blue, that's also AutoCAD letting me know that that object is selected. So I've selected my move command. I've now selected my objects. The next thing to do is either hit enter or right click. Either one works to move on to the next part of the command. So I'll hit enter. And now AutoCAD's asking me to specify a base point or enter coordinates. So when we talk about base points in AutoCAD, generally used in editing commands, a base point is the handle in which I'm going to grab this object by. This doesn't necessarily have to be on the object, but it's the location that I'm going to then drag around relative to the object. So if I choose something, like if I have my object snaps active here, and I just have center active, then I can use the center point of that circle as the grab handle that I can therefore move that circle around with. So I'm in specify base point. I'll use that object snap, the center point of that circle, and now I am dragging that circle around by its center point. And this, again, doesn't have to be in the object. You don't have to use a center snap. Wherever you click becomes the grab handle. So if I use move, select my object, hit enter, I can click somewhere completely far away. This is now my grab handle all the way out here. I can also use other snaps, like quadrant. If I turn on quadrant, I can use the quadrant snap to use that as the grab handle. So something to kind of keep in mind is whenever we use a base point, which is generally our kind of grab handle of that object, it's generally kind of useful to use snaps of that object as kind of a fixed point in order to move it around. The reason being, if I want to then use the move command to attach this circle to the line on the right, I can then use the quadrant snap on the right side here that I already have selected, and then using the endpoint snap of the line, I can fix those two together, and now they're exactly and precisely connected. Okay. Whereas if I were to choose a base point that was somewhere kind of random, now if I use that object snap, you can see it's not aligned properly. And I have to end up kind of eyeballing it. So using base point in conjunction with your object snaps helps a lot with precision as well. You'll notice as well when I use the move command, and again, I'm going to grab the center point of the circle. As I move my cursor around, I have a gray outline of where that circle used to be. So it's letting me know where that circle was and now where it's going to be. And I have a little orange dashed line that's called the rubber band. And the rubber band is also giving me kind of a heads up of where that circle is moving to. Just in case I'm scrolled away somewhere over here and then I can't see the original, then that rubber band also kind of helps me notify me of where that circle's coming from. So I can come back and then see where I'm pulling it from. We don't necessarily have to use object snaps only or click to select where this circle is going to move. You can see now that I've selected my base point and I'm moving this circle around, I would be able to click or I can use object snaps, but I also have the dynamic input prompt notifying me there that I can select a second point by using a distance and an angle. So I don't have to click in order to place this circle. I can also add distance angle. So I can put something like 20 units, 90 degrees, and that will move my circle up 20 units, 90 degrees being north. And just like the line tool, where instead of using a length angle, we can also use just straight up coordinates. So if I reset this circle, I'll draw a new circle just for flow here. I'll draw a new circle at the point 0, 0, just at the origin. Give it a radius of 10. This doesn't really matter, just kind of to prove a point here. If I move this circle by its center point, I can then also use coordinates to move this circle. So I don't have to use length angle. I don't have to click. I can also use coordinates, where if I type something like 5, 5, this is going to move the center point of that circle 5 units to the right and 5 units up. So then when I hit enter, now the center point should be located at 5, 5. Keep in mind, if you do use this method to move that circle around, the coordinates are relative. So if I do another 5, 5 here, it's going to move another 5 to the right and another 5 up. And now the center point will be at 10, 10. So the coordinates, if you use the coordinate method, just keep in mind it's relative. So if it was originally at 5, 5, I add another 5, 5, then it's going to be at 10, 10 as the final location there. Okay. So to kind of summarize, with using the move command, if I just have any circle here, I select move. Move is going to tell me on my prompt there to select objects. I select the object. I can highlight in blue. I can lasso it if I want. I'll then press enter to move on to the next step. Specify the base point or handle of this circle. And then I can use any of the three methods. I can either use object snaps or just freehand click to select where this circle is going to be placed. I can use a length angle, or I can use coordinates to move this circle to choose its final location. Okay. Any questions about move so far? All good? Okay. So, like I said, this can be pretty handy for piecing together larger or more complex objects. If I go back, I'm going to draw my trusty fuse again. And I'm drawing it in pieces here. So I've drawn the two ends of the fuse, the two circles, and this is the center rectangle. This be a 1. So from here, I now have the two end pieces. I just got to stick them on the other opposite sides of this rectangle. I can easily use move here to move this circle. And then using object tracking, or object snap tracking in this case, I can type 8 and hit enter. And now I know these two circles are 8 units apart from each other. And then I can take this rectangle here, using its geometric center snap, moving it by its geometric center, and I made these 8 units apart, so the center point should be 4 units across to place it right in the middle, and then I can finish it off here. And there's my fuse. So I pieced together the different objects there, and then also with using object snap tracking, I was able to move the circles into the correct place for spacing as well. A couple other things with move as well. If I have an object, I'll just draw a circle for simplicity. We don't necessarily have to use the move command itself. So you can click on move, or you can type MO, MOVE. I believe the even shorter hand is just M. If you want to use the command line. So M will give you move. You can click on it if you want. If you don't want to use the move command at all, just because you're doing something really quickly, we also have a couple other ways to move objects outside of the move command. So one of these methods is by selecting whatever object I want to move. We'll highlight it in blue. And then if I just simply click and drag this object around, it will move it. Be careful not to click on the grips, these little blue squares. Those are different editing commands. If I just click along the highlighted blue line anywhere, I should be able to click and drag that object around. So that's a really rapid way of moving objects. Keep in mind, this is very, very imprecise. Most notably because when I click and drag, I can't set coordinates, I can't set a length angle, I can't use object snaps very precisely. So this is a very imprecise way of moving. But if you're doing something like a diagram where the dimensions don't matter as much, this might be kind of a quick way that you might use to move objects. Or if you just need to move it in the right ballpark, like it doesn't have to be exactly set properly right away. If I just need to organize my workspace by kind of moving some stuff out of the way, I can quickly click and drag on that line to just get it out of the way. Again, very imprecise, but a very rapid way to move an object. Another way I can move objects without using the move command itself is if I click on the object to select it and it's highlighted blue, I can also use the control key, holding down control and then using the arrow keys on my keyboard, I can nudge objects around as well. I'll use a bit of a smaller circle so it's a bit more obvious here. So holding control and using the arrow keys, you can see it kind of nudges a few pixels. Again, not particularly precise because I don't really know how far that object's moving in any direction. But if you just need to nudge something into place, like it looks slightly misaligned and you just need to move it over a little bit. So I move it over so it's over to the right side of this green axis line. That might be a quick way to do it as well. Just for very small fine-tuned movements, but again, fairly imprecise. Okay. Any questions about those two? Again, it's just a quick way, either for small movements or for larger movements. Again, very imprecise, but very rapid ways of moving objects. Okay. So that pretty much covers moving. Speaking of which, we'll move on to 5.3, copying objects. So copying is going to work very functionally similar to moving. There's a few things to kind of note when we're doing copy as well. So we'll kind of go through it here. I'll open my AutoCAD. So the copy command is going to allow me to make duplicates or copies of existing objects. So if I have a circle here and I want more of this circle, I can use copy to make more of this circle. So the copy command, just like move and most of our other editing commands, is in the modify panel. Here it is, copy. So I can click on copy to make it active, the active command, or its shortcut is CO. CO will give me copy as well. And just like moving, you can note right away that it's giving me the little selection box instead of my crosshair. So I know I'm supposed to be selecting objects. Again, my dynamic input also lets me know. But just in case you have dynamic input off and it doesn't show that, that selection box also kind of lets you know you're supposed to be selecting objects. Okay. So just like with move, I've selected the command. Now I need to select my objects. So I'll choose this circle here as the object that I want to copy. Again, I can lasso it. I can just click on it, whatever means that you prefer. Once I've selected my objects, in order to continue with the command, I need to hit enter. And just like with move, it's asking me for a base point. So again, I can use any object snaps on this circle as a base point. I can click anywhere else. Functionally, it works the same way. So I'm going to use the center point. And now, after I've selected the center point as my base point, I have that same rubber band showing me where the original object was and where this new object will be. Again, I can enter a length angle. I can do coordinates instead. And when I hit enter or click, it will make a copy there. You'll notice right away after making that first copy, you do not exit the copy command. Unlike move, where I moved the object and then it exited me out of the command, I'm done moving. With copy, I've made that first copy, and now I can continue to make as many copies as I want until I tell AutoCAD I'm done by hitting escape. This is very similar if you kind of recall back with lines, where AutoCAD's just going to keep prompting you to make line segments until you tell AutoCAD to stop making line segments by exiting the command. So I can keep clicking, keep making circles, but as soon as I hit escape, then now I'm done with my copy command. When we copy objects as well, something to keep in mind is that copy doesn't just copy the object itself, it copies all properties associated with that object in its entirety, all of them. What I mean by that is that if I change the color of these circles, when I go to copy that circle, if I set them to something like red, the copy will also be red. Same with if it has any layer properties. If it's associated with a layer, it's going to copy those properties. If there's a certain line weight, of what line thickness, it's going to copy that as well. It's going to make an actual one-to-one copy of the same object. So just to kind of demonstrate here, I'm going to get rid of a bunch of these circles. We'll cover this in more detail later, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going in my properties panel here. And at the top, this drop-down menu that says by layer, beside this little color wheel, I'm going to change this to red. Or maybe yellow. Yellow's a bit brighter. So my circle's now yellow. Once I've selected it, changed it to yellow here. Now, if I copy this circle, just to kind of prove the point here, if I copy and paste it, all of the pasted copies are also yellow. So copies everything about that object, not just the shape itself. Okay. So with copy as well, we do also have a few different methods of using copy. We don't have to use the copy tool every time. I don't have to use it from the ribbon or type it out. There's a few other ways, just like with move, the kind of two side, more rapid ways of using move. We also have a few other methods of using copy as well. So going back to my circle here, similar to move, I can select this circle here, so it's highlighted blue. And when I go to click and drag, this was our rapid way of moving that circle. But if I click and drag and then hold Control and then let go of my mouse, I make a copy. So this is also the rapid way of making copies. So to go through that again, I've selected the circle here, highlighted it blue. Just like with the move command, I click and drag the edge of that circle, just like when we were moving, but then I'll hold Control. And you can see the little plus sign shows beside my cursor there when I hold Control and let it go. So when holding Control, then I can let go of the mouse and it'll make a copy. But you must click and drag first. You can't hold Control and then click and drag. It just doesn't work that way. There's a different command in 3D AutoCAD that uses that order of operations, so it doesn't work. You have to click and drag the object first, then hold Control, then let go. Okay. So again, a rapid way of doing copy. It's not precise because I don't know where it's being placed. I don't have exact coordinates or length angle or anything like that, but another rapid way of doing it. Something to mention as well with the copy command is when, after I've selected my object, I'm hitting enter, select my base point, go to copy. When I'm selecting the second, or after I've made at least one copy of this circle, so I've made that copy in the middle there, I can now use the down arrow menu to select undo. So again, very similar to line segment, where you can repeatedly make line segments and then use the down arrow menu or U to undo each individual line segment or copy in this case. So I can make a few of them here. Make a bunch. And then every time I go down to undo, it's going to undo the most recent copy I've made. Same if I do U, I can type U and hit enter. And again, this is the method to undo within a command. The undo at the top here is on a command basis. So if I spam this one up here, this undo up here, I might go too far and accidentally undo some commands. So it's a little safer to do it within the command, because then you can't accidentally undo other commands that you've done prior to the copy. Like if I draw some lines here, and then I go do my copy, just to kind of show the point here. If I just go and use undo or Ctrl Z a bunch of times, I might accidentally get to the point where I'm removing other commands. But if I do it within the command, then I don't have that risk. Or if I make a bunch of these and I keep typing U and hitting enter, it's eventually going to get to the point where it just starts denying my undo requests. Okay. There's a couple other ways that I can copy as well. With the circle again, instead of using copy or CO or clicking and dragging here, we can also use our shortcut menu. So if I select the circle and right click on it, right clicking gives me the shortcut menu. Remember, whenever you use right click to enter a menu, it's called the shortcut menu. And in here, I have a section called clipboard. In clipboard, I have my cut, copy, and paste. We have a couple options for cut and copy as well. We can copy without a base point, or I can copy with a base point. So what this is going to control is whether or not I'm selecting this object with a base point. If I do not select a base point, AutoCAD is automatically going to assign a base point to the bottom left of the object. So copy with base point is going to let me select where that base point should be, like the center. And then when I go to paste, by right-clicking, going to paste, now I have it by the center point again. But if I choose to copy without a base point, and I go to paste, now AutoCAD's automatically assigned a base point to the bottom left of that object. Okay. And again, right-clicking anywhere, using clipboard and paste will recall what I've most recently copied or cut. The clipboard, paste, works functionally the same as most other software. If you used copy and paste by right-clicking to the shortcut menu in Word or Excel or anything like that, functionally the same thing. Except for the added kind of little caveat of the base point, because we're drawing objects. And then with cut, copy will leave the original intact, but if I use cut, then the original disappears, but I can recall it with paste. Okay. So the only difference between cut and copy is if I want to leave the original intact. Copy, we'll leave it there. And cut, we'll get rid of it. Okay. So if you prefer to use the shortcut menu because you don't like reaching up here or you don't like typing, if you prefer using mouse only, those are methods to do so. We can also use the kind of shorthand, the shortcut for copy and paste as well. So you might be also familiar with Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V. Those also work in AutoCAD. If I use Ctrl-C, I just have to select the object first. Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V will also give me the option to paste. I'll use a rectangle just to show I'm not using previous command here. So Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V. Ctrl-V will recall that rectangle. Keep in mind, this is the shortcut way of using copy and paste, so it's not going to let you specify the base point. If I want to specify the base point and use the shortcut key, then I have to do Control-Shift-C, and that will ask me for base point. So Control-Shift-C, and it'll give me base point, select the base point, and then when I go to Control-V, I can place it wherever based on that base point. So I'll use not the bottom left to prove my point here. We'll use a geometric center. So Control-Shift-C, use the geometric center here. Control-V brings it back up with the base point. You can also see when you go into the shortcut menu under clipboard, it also gives you the keyboard shortcuts here. So copy being Control-C. If you want to use it with a base point, Control-Shift-C. Paste being Control-V. We're not using paste as block just yet. So mostly these first 5 here. Okay. Again, plenty of different ways to do this. None are necessarily better than the others. They all have their kind of own place, own purpose, and it's up to your preference. The only hard limitation to which method you choose is whether it comes with precision or not. So when I use my click and drag method, the only limitation here really is that I've lost precision. Otherwise, it's a perfectly valid way to copy your objects. That's the only real hard limit to kind of keep in mind, is whether your method includes precision or not. And whether that's important to you or not. If you're moving around text, you might not care about precision that much. Or if you're drawing a diagram and the dimensions don't matter because it's just a diagram, then maybe you don't care. So it's up to you. It's up to the application as well. Okay. Any questions about copying before we move on?
Well, that's very good. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. So continuing on then. Moving on from copy, we have rotate. So often handy to rotate objects. Sometimes we draw them perpendicular right side up. So it's kind of easy to draw and easy to conceptualize when drawing. And then maybe we have to pivot it in a weird angle so it connects to something else later. Plenty of reasons why we might use rotate. So I'm going to draw a rectangle because my circle's not going to be obvious for rotating here. With rotate, rotate being in our modify panel again, top center. If you choose to use the shortcut, it's RO, or you can type out the whole word rotate. This will also give me rotate. Just like our other editing commands, it's going to have a selection, it's going to have a base point, yada, yada, yada. So With rotate, I select objects, I hit enter, and now I specify the base point. In this case, base point's slightly different definition. Rather than the handle that I'm grabbing this by and moving it or copying it to that handle, this is now my pivot point for my rotation. So this is the point, the center of rotation or the pivot point. If I choose the bottom left corner of this rectangle, I'm now spinning that rectangle around that bottom left corner. Okay. So in some cases with move and copy, you might not care where the base point is that much, but in the case of rotate, it's going to matter quite a bit. If I choose rotate and select the base point somewhere off the rectangle, then it's going to rotate around that point. So that might cause some differences because the radius of rotation is now larger than if I pick the corner. Okay. So after I've selected that base point or pivot point, or whatever you want to call it, I can move my cursor around and the new object will be shown there and the old object shown in gray or kind of grayed out in the background here. And I can freely rotate my object. On my prompt there, on my dynamic input, I can also specify the exact angle of rotation. So if I put 90 in here, it should stand my rectangle up vertically. So hitting enter, my rectangle is now vertical. Something to kind of keep in mind here, the rotation angle is always counterclockwise for the most part. This isn't like when we were using other tools where it was like 180 degrees on top, and then if you move your cursor below, it flips to the other 180 degrees going clockwise. This is always positive counterclockwise. Therefore, if I want to move this clockwise, I can make a negative angle to move it clockwise instead. So if I do it negative 90, it should rotate so the rectangle's down here, because 90 degrees clockwise. It shouldn't be on the left. If it was on the left, then it would be a positive 90. So negative 90, we'll set it down to the right. And if I undo that and do a positive 90 rotation, then it should be down to the left here. Okay. So when you enter this number, it's always going to be positive counterclockwise. Negative will put you clockwise. So I can put angles greater than 90 in here, greater than 180 even. If I undo again here, uh, 90 degrees or negative 90 degrees should flip it to the left, down to the left, down here. So this should be my negative 90 degrees. So that should also be equivalent to positive 270 degrees. So if I do positive 270, that should also lay it flat down to the right. Okay. Either way works, whatever makes more sense in your head. If you do want to change it so clockwise is positive, which is why I say it's not technically always positive counterclockwise, you can change it in the settings. If you go to your application menu, drawing utilities, units, you can change your angle to be clockwise here. That's up to personal preference. Standard convention is positive, is counterclockwise, but if you do prefer it to be clockwise positive, then this is where you can do that. Okay. Something to kind of keep in mind with rotate is where our copy and move, we're very reliant on object snaps if we kind of want to do it quickly. Rotate is going to be a bit more reliant on polar tracking to be a bit more accurate. So if I rotate this object, and I don't necessarily want to specify or go through the typing to specify the angle, I might use polar tracking to help me out with that angle. So I can use my polar tracking angles to snap to those specific angles. Just in case I don't want to type if it's a bit too slow, I can quickly at a glance know that this is 90 degrees, so I can quickly snap it. Same if I need to move it another 90 degrees or 180. It's a quick way to snap to a specific and precise angle to rotate that object as well. So use polar tracking in tandem with rotate to kind of make sure your angles are precise. It might be precise when I first initially drew it, but if then when I go to rotate it and it's not an exact amount of degrees of rotation, then I can kind of develop some imprecision in my drawing as well. Okay. Last kind of thing with rotate as well is that when I select my objects with rotate, move on to the base point, I've selected my base point. I'm now rotating the object here. I can also use copy in tandem with rotate. So I'm rotating the object, but if I press down arrow for my dynamic prompt little extra menu here, I also get copy in this menu. So going to copy and hitting enter, you can see that my original is now highlighted white again. It's no longer grayed out. And I have the new rotated object. So this will leave the original intact and make a copy that is now rotated. So I can do copy kind of within the rotate command. This is kind of handy if you do need to do something that has some sort of radial symmetry. If I have one rectangle upright and I need to do another one down here somewhere or at a 45 degrees or something, then this would be an easy way to make duplicates, but there has to be some sort of radial component to it. It has to be rotationally kind of part of that equation. Otherwise, I just use a regular copy command, right? So then I can hit enter, and now I've made a copy and rotated the copy at the same time. Okay. Again, if you prefer using rotate and copy as separate commands, you don't want to mix them because it gets a bit messy, by all means, use them as separate commands. It's just a way to kind of speed things up. Okay. Any questions about rotate? All good. Okay. So it's about 6:49 right now. We're about halfway through the class. So I'm going to give you guys a quick 10-minute break. We'll reconvene here at 7, and then we'll continue on with our last edit command and then kind of dip into assignment 2. Okay. So we'll be back at 7 here. All right, let's continue on here. So let me share my screen again. So we covered moving, copying, rotating, now on to scaling. So scale is going to allow us to adjust the size of objects. We can make objects bigger or smaller based on the scale factor. And we'll show you what that looks like here as well. So in AutoCAD here, scale again in my modify panel here. Just check here. Yeah. So scale in my modify panel. Again, I'm going to draw a rectangle here. Let's just do a rectangle for ease here. I'm going to make it 5 by 5. It's a 5 by 5 square. And with the scale command, I can select it from the menu. I can type it in here, SC for scale. And just like all the other editing commands, it's going to ask me to select objects. So I can lasso, I can left click, whatever I need to do to select that object. Hitting enter to confirm that I've selected all of my objects. And then specifying the base point. So the base point with scale isn't highly critical in most cases. If you want to keep it in kind of one same spot, it can be kind of handy. What this base point is going to be the point that this shape will expand or contract from. So if I choose the bottom left corner of this square, now I am expanding and contracting that square based on that corner piece. Okay. If I exit out of this command, I can also use scale, select the object, specify the base point as the geometric center, and now I am expanding and contracting around the geometric center of that square. So all sides are moving equally. Okay. So this is the point in which I am expanding or contracting that object by. I can move my mouse cursor to expand and contract that square, or I can type in or specify a scale factor. So you can see on my dynamic input there, it says specify scale factor. Any number smaller than 1 is going to decrease the size of my square. If I use exactly 1, it's going to keep the same size because I multiplied the size of that square by 1, so it should keep the same square. And any number larger than 1 is going to increase the size of this square. So if I wanted to exactly make this square half as big as it currently is, I could put 0.5. 0.5 would be half 50% scale of this square, and hitting enter, now my square is half as large where it was before, and then using a scale of half to make it what it is now. This scale isn't on an area basis. It's not half area. It's half of if all the points were moved halfway inwards to whatever your base point is. If I go back to my original square, my 5 by 5 here, when I reduce the size, then if I go to measure this now, all the sides are 2.5. Okay. So if I use a scale factor now, of something like 2.0, that would double the size of the square. So if I put in a scale factor of 2, it's now twice as large. It's now a 10 by 10 square. Okay. Just like with rotate, you can also use copy within the scale command. So I can use scale and then use something like the bottom left corner as my base point for that scale. But I can type C or copy in here in my dynamic input menu. And this will also allow me to keep the original intact, but now the copy that I'm producing is scaled. So I can put in something like 0.5 in here. And now I have two squares. The sides are halved in magnitude for the second square, and the original square has its original 10 by 10 dimensions here. Okay. And remember, it's not double area because this bigger square is now 10 by 10, so total area of 100. This smaller square is now 5 by 5, so an area of 25. So it's changing the side lengths or the positions of the corners of this rectangle. It's not half of the area. Same if you do it with a circle. It's like half of the radius, not half of the area of the circle. Okay. So that's pretty much scale. Any questions about that? It's typically a bit handier when you're using copy in scale. When you use scale by itself, has a bit more limited applications. You could have just drawn the object the right scale in the first place. So it doesn't really make much sense to kind of rescale things as they exist unless there's amendments to be made to a drawing, if there's like changes that happen that require you to change the scale of the drawing. Generally speaking, it's not horribly common. It's usually to make a shape within a shape that's scaled, like my two squares there, is generally a bit more of a useful application.
Brent, for circle, will it do the same thing for the radius, or it will
Yes.
count as the whole diameter?
Same thing. Diameter and radius, if I have either of them, I should end up with the same kind of deal. So if I have a 5 radius circle here, or same thing if it's a 10 diameter circle, same idea. But if I go to scale these now, using the base point as the center, 0.5, if I scale either of these, 0.5, it doesn't like that very much. I chose the wrong base point, that's why. Then they're both the same. So it's always having the diameter or the radius. It's effectively the same. This is 2.5 on the radius now, if I go to measure it. The original radius was 5. Or if I double that, the diameter is now 5, but the diameter was originally 10. So it's having the diameter or radius of the circle, effectively the same thing. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if I have a diameter of 10 and I have it, goes down to radius of 5, or a radius of 5, it halves to 2.5. It's effectively the same. Okay. So that's it for scale. Our last editing command for today is mirror. So mirror is going to allow me to create a new object or copy an object. We'll kind of talk about that as well, across a line of symmetry. Okay. So if I go back to AutoCAD here, I'm going to use a triangle because it's a bit more obvious. This isn't going to be any specific triangle. It's just going to look like a triangle. So I've made my triangle here, and my mirror command, again, in the modify panel here, we have mirror. I can also type mi, gives me mirror. And just like all my other editing commands, it's going to require me to select objects. Press enter to continue on. Let AutoCAD know I'm done selecting objects. And now, normally with my other modify commands, it would be asking me right now for a base point. With mirror, it's going to actually want me to pick the first and second points of a mirror line. You might also call this the axis of symmetry. This is going to be the line that this object is reflected over. So if I make a 90-degree line, a 90-degree vertical line here, then my triangle here should be flipped onto the other side of the line. And let me make a right angle triangle because it's going to be a bit more obvious here. So I have a right angle triangle here. If I mirror this now, I now need to select my mirror line. This doesn't have to be anything precise because it's just a line of symmetry, right? The only precision I need to be worried about is the distance from the object to the mirror line. And I'll show you why. So if I choose the endpoint on this triangle here, and then do 90 degrees upwards, you can see that that line, that mirror line I'm creating, is now kind of the mirror, the axis of symmetry that triangle is being reflected over. Okay. But the only thing I have to really consider is the distance of that mirror line to the object. If I now make this mirror line, and I'll use tracking here to set that distance as 2, now my mirror line is 2 units away from the object, and on the reflection is also 2 units from the mirror line. Okay, so it does depend how far the mirror line is from the object. It doesn't depend on how long the mirror line is. I can make the mirror line very small and it wouldn't matter. Because if I make the mirror line against the endpoint here and I only make it just about a unit long, doesn't matter. AutoCAD knows that that line extends infinitely upwards and downwards. Anywhere along this line, I get the exact same mirror as long as I'm on this tracking line here. So the main thing to keep in mind is how far away the mirror line is from the object, because that will also change how far the reflection is from the mirror line. Then I can click. And once I've clicked, normally with our other editing commands, it would just do the command and then I'd be able to move on. But with mirror, it's going to give me a little question here. With dynamic input, it asks me erase source objects and a little question mark. What this means is, do I want to erase the object I started with? So do I want to keep the original or get rid of it? If I choose yes, it's going to remove my original object and only keep the reflection. If I choose no, then I will have both the original and the reflection left intact. So if I hit no, now I have both triangles. But if I choose yes, again, setting my mirror line, if I choose yes, then the original disappears and I'm only left with the reflection. So mirror can kind of be used for 2 purposes because of that command. If I want to just reflect that object, if I just want to swap its orientation, then I wouldn't want to keep the original. But if I'm drawing something that's very symmetrical, then I might want to keep the original because then it saves me half of the work, right? Because if I'm drawing something where there is a requirement for 2 triangles to be meeting, then I can usually use the quick mirror command to draw that triangle really rapidly for me without having to manually do it myself. Just like with my fuse, if I go back to my fuse here and I draw my stuff, oops, that wasn't, or is that fine? Good enough. So rather than drawing the second circle, this one's a bit simplistic because drawing the circle is not difficult. What I'll do actually Let's get rid of one of these lines. Okay, so what I can do here is draw half of the fuse. And then instead of taking the tedious work of drawing this next line, the connecting line and the circle, I can use mirror to select those three pieces, hit enter, go midpoint to midpoint, and that just saved me 3 commands of drawing, right? Because I didn't have to draw this piece now. And then if I select no for erasing source objects, now I have both. Of course, this fuse symbol is pretty simple, but when it comes to more complicated drawings that might have some sort of symmetry to them, it saves a lot of work down the line. You can save like up to 50% of the amount of time that you have to spend on a drawing, if there is that symmetry available. Okay. Another thing to kind of keep in mind with mirror is using polar tracking as well. So as I've kind of demonstrated a little bit, when I go to mirror this object here, a handy tool to use while mirroring is polar tracking. So if I select the first point, I can make sure that that mirror line is perfectly 90 degrees, so everything lines up properly by using polar tracking. If I were to turn my polar tracking off and just eyeball it, now my lines are not properly aligned and they're a bit crooked. So polar tracking can kind of help us both speed up and be more precise with mirroring as well. Okay. So just to kind of recap mirroring, I use my mirror command. Something I should mention as well, you don't have to select the command first and then select the objects. You can select the objects first and then the command. It also works. Either way, you get the same outcome. So if you have the tendency to select objects first, then hit mirror, that's fine. Or if you want to hit mirror first, then select the objects, both ways work. Okay. So again, with mirror, selecting my objects here, press enter. I now need to draw my mirror line, which will be around the center of this fuse symbol. And then by clicking, it asks me if I want to erase my source objects. In this case, I have symmetry. I want to keep both parts. I'll say no, because I don't want to erase the source object. There are some cases where I might be drawing a triangle here. Turn my polar tracking back on. And I just want to simply flip this triangle. I don't want to draw something with symmetry, but I want to flip this triangle. So I can use mirror to use this axis of symmetry to flip the triangle over. I can hit yes to erase source objects. And now I've just successfully mirrored or flipped that triangle so that the right angle is on the other side now. Okay, so it's kind of a dual purpose. Any questions about mirror at all? And of course, you don't have to use 90-degree angles. You can do 45-degree angles, whatever angle you wish with the mirror line. Okay, if there's no questions, that pretty much covers what we're going to be talking about in terms of me lecturing for tonight. I'll go over assignment 2 real quick if you want to get a head start. And then after I've kind of talked through assignment 2, then the rest of the time, whatever we have remaining, is for you guys to either go through 5B in the textbook. 5B is a little exercise in using some of the modifying commands that we've gone through. I'll probably save it for Thursday. I'll go through it as a class on Thursday, and we'll finish up chapter 5 on Thursday as well. There's just one last kind of section there. So the rest of today, we'll just go through assignment 2, and then it's free time to work on either practice 5B, or if you want to get a head start on assignment 2, you can get started on assignment 2 as well. Okay. So assignment 2 is located in the week 4 folder. So down in the week 4 folder here, you should have a PDF document for assignment 2. And when you open that up, you should have a PDF that looks like this. ENGD 238, assignment 2. And just like assignment 1, make sure you follow the instructions carefully and follow the procedure exactly. So for assignment 2, our procedure for this one is to complete extra practice 2. Assignment 1 was a couple projects out of the textbook. Assignment 2 is now pulling from the extra practice folder. And just keep in mind, extra practice 2 is in the extra practice folder on Brightspace. So if I go back here and look for my extra practice folder, just above the weekly folders here, extra practice 2, there's a PDF and a drawing file. Make sure you grab both. And when I open up extra practice 2, we have our drawing here that we're to create. So quickly going through this document, you're going to need extra practice 2, the drawing file to complete the drawing. There is a empty drawing file. We'll talk about it in a bit as well. That is the basis of this drawing. You're to draw the object shown on this page, starting at the coordinate 105, 175. Remember, follow the directions. You don't want to accidentally center this on the origin. There's a reason for that. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. You're then to draw the complete object on the circles layer. We'll talk about that as well. By default, it's set to the circles layer, so you don't have to fiddle with anything. You should be able to just draw it as soon as you open up the drawing file. And just like with assignment 1, the dimensions and the center lines are for reference only. I don't expect you to draw these center lines on the circles or draw in any of these dimensions. The drawing itself should be to scale as described in this image, but you don't have to draw the actual dimensions themselves. Okay. So if I open up AutoCAD here, I have an example, and I'll also open extra practice 2 here. So when you go to download and open extra practice 2, you might be shown this little pop-up about proxy information. This is like a little pop-up letting you know that another software was used, or another add-on on AutoCAD that you don't have installed was used to make this drawing. That's not a big deal, doesn't matter. It's just kind of an artifact from when this was made. You can just hit show proxy graphics or do not show, there's no real difference, and then hit OK. You get this pop-up box, you can just hit do not show or show. It shouldn't show anything anyways, but then just hit OK, and you should have the drawing file ready for you. Again, it's just because the drawing file itself was made with someone's version of AutoCAD that had extra stuff on it, and we don't have that extra stuff, so don't worry about it. It won't affect your drawing in any way. So with extra practice 2, it'll be kind of similar with the folder or the files for assignment 1 with the simple 1 and simple 2 drawings, where you're met with a blank drawing file, or seemingly blank. One of the key reasons why we need to use this drawing file instead of using, say, a new drawing file, if I hit just the new plus sign for a new drawing. First things first, we have layers in here. The layers is just in this layers panel. We'll talk about this in more detail. It's not highly critical right now, The only thing you have to make sure is that the circles layer is active. So up here in this drop-down menu, it should say circles. If it does not say circles, just click the drop-down menu and select circles, and it should set you back. If I switch this and it's on something else, just go back, select circles, and you should be good to go. That being said, by default, when you open this drawing, you should be on circles already. Okay? So that's the first thing, again, outlined by the instructions here. Make sure you complete the object on the circles layer. So if I go back here, you'll open your extra practice 2. You'll go through, make your drawing to spec with the right coordinates, and you should end up with something that looks like this. So this circle or set of circles is not centered on the origin. It starts at the correct starting point. All the circles are placed. You can see there's no dimensions on here. The dimensions are not necessary. It's in orange, so I know it's on the circles layer here because the circles layer is also orange. So this is my completed drawing. I've drawn everything. Looks similar to this example. It's on the right layer. It's at the right starting point. I'm good to go. Once you've finished your drawing here, going back, that would end this assignment document, the Extra Practice 2 PDF. I've finished all these instructions. I'm good to go. Going back now to the Assignment 2 PDF. So I've gone through the procedure. I've completed Extra Practice 2. I've grabbed it, etc., etc. I'm done that. Now when I get to deliverables here, it says I need a drawing file and I need a PDF file. So it's one drawing, but I need 2 files. Unlike assignment 1, where there are 2 drawings, 2 separate drawing files that you submit, in this case, it's one drawing, but I need it in both .dwg and .pdf. And we'll show you how to do that as well. Again, same file name format, your name, first name, last name, assignment 2, and one will be a drawing file and the other will be a PDF file. Okay, you can ignore this due date here. This is just from previous semesters. Again, all these assignments are due at the end of the semester, so you can ignore this. Okay. When you are finished as well, just in assignments, the Dropbox folder is here for assignment 2, and you can see the due date isn't until April 17th. So just as a verification, I see someone's already submitted. That due date is not correct. You have until the end of the semester. Okay. So going back here, let me make sure I have all the files I need. Okay, so I've finished my drawing on AutoCAD. It's at the right coordinates, it's on the right layer, it's all the right dimensions. I'm happy with it. What I now have to do is, first of all, save it as a drawing file. So when you go regularly save, just like you did with assignment 1, we have the file extension .dwg. So we're good to go. That's my drawing file. I can save that. That file will be submitted. I also need a PDF. So in order to get the PDF, there's a very specific way we have to do this. When it comes to plotting drawings from AutoCAD, I need to go into my application menu. And down where it says print, I get some options for plotting. And plotting is the general kind of drafting term for making this drawing into some sort of printable format, either a PDF or an actual physical print or anything like that. Okay. So when I go to print, I'll hit plot. It might give me this little batch plot pop-up. You can just hit do not show me this again, continue to plot a single sheet. We don't need to do batch plot. It's just a feature if you need to plot a whole bunch of layouts at the same time. We're only doing one. So I just needed to plot a single sheet. And I get the plot menu here. Okay. So from here, you're going to notice if you do it the way I've done it so far, our page setup has no name because we haven't saved it as a name yet. And our printer plotter is empty here. We have to select one from the drop menu here. This is the incorrect way of doing this. What I need to do first, the process is correct, but I've made a mistake. What I need to do is go to the A4 tab or the A4 layout at the bottom left of my screen. I have to go to the A4 layout down there and then do this process. So going to application menu, print, and it should give me where my printer plotter now says DWG to PDF.PC3. So if you don't see the plotter automatically filled, you're in the wrong place. So when I go through that process, again, I switch from the model space to this layout. We'll talk about layouts in more detail down the line. A layout is a format for that drawing to be printed on a specific size of paper. So this would be what the drawing looks like when it's printed. This is why, A, you need the right drawing file because this layout won't exist if you have the wrong drawing file. B, if you start at the wrong starting coordinate, your circle will not fit in this page. Your circle will be down here somewhere, down somewhere to the bottom left. And it will not be inside the page. So that's why we need the right starting coordinate, because otherwise, if I move this all down, let me move that properly. If I move this and start it at the origin instead, just approximately, if I go back to my layout, you can see it's gone. So that's why we need the right starting coordinate as well. If I undo that here, your circle should fit nicely into the layout. So again, I've gone through my drawing. It's on the right layer. It's the right dimensions, yada, yada. I'm good to go. When I need to turn this into a PDF, I'll go A4 layout, go to my application menu, plot. You can just click on print right away, or you can go to the plot here. And it should say DWG to PDF. I don't have to do anything from here. I can just hit OK. Everything should be set up normally by default. And if I go to save this now, I'm going to overwrite this PDF I made earlier. I'm going to overwrite it here. Then I should now have a PDF file based on that drawing. Okay, so I saved it to my desktop. So if I open it from my desktop now, then I get my drawing. And an easy, really quick way to make sure that you've done this correctly, the circle should be fairly centered on the page. It shouldn't be peeking up from the bottom or cut off in any way. It should be right smack in the center of this paper. If it looks like it's kind of out to space somewhere, or if it's missing entirely, you've missed a step somewhere. Okay. If I do this from the model space, so if I go from model and print and manually do this, drawing to PDF. Let's call this one 2. Then I get this really tiny guy down here. So make sure you're on the correct layout before you print to PDF. If you're on the model space, it's going to take the size of your screen or the zoom level that you're at, and that's not correct as well. So just to recap the proper way, I've made my drawing, A4, application menu, print. It should automatically give me drawing to PDF, and I just have to hit OK. Name this by the file format. My name, assignment 2, save, and there it is. Okay. So now I have a PDF file, Brent Lidfor's assignment2.pdf. It looks right on the page. I'm ready to submit that into the Dropbox. Okay. Any questions about that process at all? I'll go through it again. Auto center on the PDF. That technically is the way to auto center to the PDF. When you design a layout, we'll talk about it in more detail down the line when we actually do layouts. But the layout here is designed in a way that this is kind of a window into the drawing area. And I can center that on any object that I want. This one's done with zoom extents. So I can use zoom extents to center that object onto the layout itself. Again, we'll talk about it down the line, but technically layouts are the way to center an object on a PDF. This one's already been done for you though. Yeah. Okay, a couple tips before I cut you loose here. Keep in mind here, since this is assignment 2 and it comes right after chapter 2, the most recent chapter we've finished is like chapter 2, chapter 4. Keep in mind that this is likely testing you on the things that we've most recently covered. We haven't finished editing commands, so I don't expect you to be using modify commands at all. But what we've most recently covered is drawing with precision. So object snaps, object snap tracking, polar tracking, those are things that you're going to be using for this assignment. And that goes for like most of your courses, generally speaking. Whenever a test comes up, that test is usually testing you on something that you just covered. So similarly with assignment 2, it's likely covering drawing with precision, object snaps, polar tracking, object snap tracking, maybe ortho mode if you choose to use it, things like that. So what I'm most looking for here is things related to that and that you've followed the instructions accordingly. Okay? So as long as you're okay with the instructions here and you've followed this to a T, right file name format, you have the right drawing in PDF, and then on Extra Practice 2, you've followed all these directions, and you've satisfied the requirements of drawing with precision, there's nothing really I can dock you on. Okay? And again, if you do mess up, I don't expect you to do it perfect the first try. So just like the other assignments, you're free to resubmit once you've had your graded copy back. You can see my corrections, update it, submit it again, and I'll regrade it. Okay? Any questions about assignment 2 at all? Any confusion or anything? Of course, you can watch this recording back too, I suppose.
I do got a question about the drawing. So with the circles, when there's kind of like a circle with a dash through it and then a number after, that's the radius of the circle?
Good question. Very good question. So on Extra Practice 2 here, on the schematic, you'll notice there's a few symbols on here that we haven't really explicitly talked about. And you're asking specifically about these circles with a line through it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So whenever we see on a schematic a circle with that diagonal line through it, it's like a Greek letter phi. That is denoting a diameter. So when it says phi 30 here, that means the diameter of this circle is 30 units. Same with this one over here, it says phi 20. This one, therefore, is diameter 20. Okay. If we see an R, however, that's denoting a radius. So where we see here, it says R50. That means there's a radius of 50 units between this center point of this circle to the center point of these outside circles here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone know what TYP 3PL might mean on here? It says TYP 3PL up here, and then there's a couple down here that say TYP 2PL. Any guesses on what that might mean?
Typical in number of places.
Bingo. Yeah. So let me fish for it here. So TYP means typical, short for typical. The number is the number of that shape that exists that should be similar to the one that it's pointing at. PL is short for parts list. So there's 3 of these in my parts list that are typical to each other. So this is kind of shorthand in a lot of drawings. Oftentimes, if you're given a drawing and this is kind of handed off, or you make a drawing and it's handed off, to save a little time for the draftsperson, they might include this typical 3PL, and then it's up to the reader to figure out what 3 circles are identical on this drawing. Where these 3 circles here would now be typical, because this circle here, and this circle here are all very similar. So these would be my typical 3 circles, and therefore all 3 of those circles should have a diameter of 20. Same where I have this at the bottom here, 540 typical 2 PL and a 530 typical 2 PL. That means these 2 circles that are kind of overlapping here, they're typical in 2 places. So where's a circle that looks similar to this part? Well, it's this one on the left. So this one is missing its dimensions because it's indicated by the bottom circle that these 2 circles should be the same. Okay? Or these 4 circles, I suppose. Should be similar. Does that make sense?
How do we access the videos, like the recordings?
Sure. So in order to get to the recordings, you just have to be on the Teams channel itself here. This is the same
Okay.
place where the Q&A is and the regularly scheduled meetings.
Okay.
So by default, you're on posts. It says posts at the top here.
Okay. Check it out.
You need to switch to files,
Uh-huh.
and then there's a folder here for recordings.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you go in
I
there,
don't-
yeah.
I don't think I'm in the channel. Or should I automatically be?
I sent an email out at the beginning of the semester to invite people.
Okay.
I'll post it as an announcement on Brightspace, and then you can pull it from there if I haven't already. Let me double check. I might have. Yeah, it's an announcement here as well. If you go to
Okay.
Brightspace, there's a link at the bottom here to join.
Okay, yeah. I
Yeah.
could do that then. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Just email me if the link doesn't work, and then I can manually add you as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. No problem. Any other questions? Okay. If there's no questions, the last 6 minutes or so here are for you to either work on 5B or get started on assignment 2. Take your pick. We'll continue on next Thursday with finishing up chapter 5. We'll give some time for you guys to do assignment 2 with me present so you can ask questions. And we'll also go through the chapter 5 practice problems. So 5B, I believe 5C and D, or is it D and E? Something like that. We'll go through all the practice problems for chapter 5 on Thursday as well. Okay.
Just one question for you, Brent. I noticed
Sure.
in the task list for the week, you provided AutoCAD textbook chapter 6. Are we going to be covering that this week, or is that a next week item?
Fairly unlikely. It's just in there in case we do end up starting chapter 6, but it's pretty unlikely because it's not an outlined task. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to duck out. Thank you, Brent. Have a good night.
Yep. Sounds good. See you, Pierre. Yep. No problem, Mike. See ya. You too, Landon.